what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, October 9th, 2017, start of a brand new week, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. It's also Columbus Day, and I can just sort of imagine Columbus out there in the Atlantic Ocean, not knowing what was going to happen out there, and pointing his hand at the horizon and saying, "Land ho!" Oh, no, wait, it's only the dirt under my fingernail. But the fact of the matter is that Columbus did know what was there. He sold the trip on a new trading route to Asia, but he knew there was another landmass in the middle there because the Vikings had been there hundreds of years before, and the Vikings traded with the Muslims, and the Muslims gave that information to the Templars. And if you remember, following the destruction of the Templars in Portugal and Scotland basically turned to shipping. Henry the Navigator, and so forth and so on, and the Knights of Christ were very much into shipping. They were mariners and map makers, and there are allegations that Columbus' wife came from a Templar family. And while Queen Isabella is given credit for financing the majority of Columbus' expedition, the fact is he also got some money from the Templars, which is why the cross of the Templars appears on the sails of Columbus ships. I remember when I was in school and they'd say, "This is Columbus," and we'd all look at that big red splayed cross, and they wouldn't explain its significance, but that's the cross of the Knights Templar, going back to the days of heraldry, where most people didn't read phonetic languages. So heraldry was an iconic language, kind of like their version of emoticons, where everybody understood the language and what it meant, and it wasn't just for decorations here. All right, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room taking care of all of our technical issues, getting around all the problems and headaches with the latest version of Skype. More about that later in the program. And so let's just get on into it. Now, supposedly, Antifa were planning nationwide Deface Columbus Day actions for today. They were going to go on out and deface all the statue of Christopher Columbus. And apparently, at least 5 Christopher Columbus statues have already been vandalized in New York City in recent weeks. So far, I haven't heard of a lot of actions today here, but again, this is all cumulatively an attack on our historical traditions, on our identity, our historical regional identity, even though Columbus, again, didn't really discover the New World. The Vikings had come on over, the Egyptians had come on over, and but for political reasons and for declaring, this is our land now, we discovered it, the doctrine of discovery. Originally, Amerigo Vespucci was given credit for discovering the New World, and then eventually Columbus' son wrote a biography about Christopher Columbus and brought him back to his rightful place in history. So much for that stuff here. Now then, interesting thing, Sarah Sanders was in a press conference, and she's not shy about what's going on here. And she basically was responding to questions about the Russia investigation and all the rest of that. And she said basically, and this is a direct quote, "The Senate Intelligence Committee told us yesterday that after nearly 9 months of investigating, that's included more than 100 interviews, over 250 hours, 4,000 pages of transcripts, 100,000 pages of documents, interviewing officials in the intelligence community who wrote the report on Russian election meddling, interviewing relevant Obama administration officials, and talking to every Trump campaign official they requested. They have literally found zero evidence between the Trump campaign and Russia." And then she went on basically to say, "I think the American people would like them to focus on some other things." Yeah, we would. Can we go back to that email server scandal and its possible espionage? Because that's a valid question. Was Hillary repeating the 1994 Chinagate scandal, selling secrets in exchange for donations, in this case to the Clinton Foundation? That's a legitimate question. And it's rather become obvious how the government itself, along with the corporate media, is still out there in attack mode against Donald Trump. We're going to get Donald Trump. We're going to go get Donald Trump. Pay no attention to all those dead bodies piling up around the Clintons. That's just, there's normal expected behavior. But we've got to go on and we've got to find something about Trump. But this may be an era for the mighty to fall. And while I normally don't do entertainment news, the fall of Harvey Weinstein is sending shockwaves throughout the entertainment industry. He's been around for a very long time. He's very wealthy. He's very connected. He's very powerful. It's sort of assumed that anything that he puts his stamp on is headed to win an Academy Award. But he has a long track record of just outrageous behavior towards women and his employees. And finally, the scandal broke through to the public. And his own company has now fired him. And that followed a bunch of the executives quitting. And even his lawyer quit. His lawyer said, I'm not representing this guy anymore. So everybody's out there in self-preservation mode. They're trying to get away from him as fast as they can because he's a sinking ship and he's going to take a lot of people down with him. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates, just now rejoining our network. And again, everybody's out there trying to say, I had no idea. I mean, even though I worked with him, I had no idea this was going on. Meryl Streep was out there slamming disgraceful Harvey Weinstein and basically is saying that Rose McGowan and Ashley Judd and his other victims are heroes for exposing the mogul, which they are. Let's be very honest. They spoke out at risk of their careers. And then Meryl Streep goes on saying she never knew about the incidents of sexual harassment. Well, I'm sorry, Meryl, but it was kind of an open secret. Anyone who didn't know about what he was doing is in denial or living in a convent because Harvey's predilections and behavior, his violent streak, were well known in Hollywood even back when I worked there. But if you want to keep your career, you never criticize the moguls, you never expose the scandals of anybody who's got that much power. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people who were his victims could have exposed him, but their own ambitions to stay in film held them back. And there is a lot of that goes around in Hollywood. Everyone's afraid of that blacklist. But even Fox News is saying everyone in Hollywood knew what Harvey Weinstein has been doing all these years, sexually harassing women, abusing his employees. He's got a violent streaks. And it was better known in the industry than the rumors about Roger Ailes or Bill O'Reilly's misconduct at Fox News. And yet Weinstein continued to enjoy all the perks and the lifestyle and privileges of a successful movie mogul. Politicians wanted to be seen with him. The best actors wanted to work in his films. He was basically seen as a guarantee to Oscars, and people were willing to look the other way. And he was actually celebrated for his alleged commitment to social justice. Obviously, it was one thing when he was in front of a camera and a microphone and something else entirely. Now, Nathan Lane has broken his silence, apparently on how Weinstein threatened to destroy him and literally threw him against a wall at Hillary Clinton's birthday party 17 years ago. And basically, when this story finally broke into the corporate media, apparently Lane's response to Harvey was, you can't hurt me, I don't have a film career. And apparently on that same birthday party, Weinstein lashed out at an assistant who was supposed to be minding his reserved couch while he was on stage speaking. Remember what I said about filmmaking? It attracts the very best and the very worst in human behavior. You're working on a film crew, those people want to be there. They work to be there. They're enthusiastic about their jobs. They want the final production to be as good as possible so they can point to it with pride or hopefully pick up an award. But yes, all that money and all that power, it does draw some real sharks. In fact, I think it was Alex Baldwin had this wonderful little quote. He says, if you want money, you go to work on Wall Street. If you want power, you go to Washington, D.C. If you want lots and lots of free sex, you go into the fashion industry. But if you want all three in one toxic drink, stirred with the swizzle stick of, hey, we're being creative out here, then you go into show business. And he's absolutely right. Now, apparently, a Fox News television reporter, Lauren Sivan, in an interview with the Huffington Post, reported on how Weinstein, at a party, literally exposed himself and abused himself in front of her at a restaurant hallway. And then as he was finishing up, he just says, well, you can just stand there and shut up. This is the biggest scandal to rock Hollywood since the Bagelman incident. And that's where Bagelman was literally embezzling money from his own actors. And one of them went public with it because he got into trouble with the IRS because the IRS thought he'd been paid a lot more money than he really had. And his career got wrecked. And everybody circled the wagons around Bagelman. They all threatened to quit or to shut down Hollywood. If anything bad happened to Bagelman, they were going to just, but ultimately he did have to step down. And but again, the guy who exposed his embezzlement had his career destroyed. It's just this little boys club where they all can get away with this kind of stuff and they protect each other. It's like when you were in high school, remember the socias or the cliques, or I don't know what name they use for them today, but it was all the kids of the rich people who always seemed to get away with anything and they were always covering for each other. That's basically that kind of attitude. Apparently, back in 2004, Weinstein colluded with the New York Times editor to kill a story about a sexual assault. And Matt Damon and Russell Crowe called in to vouch for the Miramax employees. So, again, the corporate media, entertainment, very tightly tied together. The New York Times was one of Weinstein's media enablers. They all knew this stuff was going on. Can't say anything about him. He's a mogul. Can't do a thing about that. He's a mogul. Somebody went back and did an analysis of 1,400 Oscar acceptance speeches and found that Harvey Weinstein was thanked more than God. So that tells you the kind of power that he has. Now, a lot of Democrats, a lot of liberals who were beneficiaries of Weinstein's political contributions are now being asked, well, now that it's turned out this guy really isn't living the life of a liberal, that he was a sexual monster, are you going to return the donations? And Feinstein's kind of hemming and hawing, and at first she said, well, I'm not sure he's ever donated to me, and then Chuck Todd was interviewing her and said that, yeah, actually, we've got the whole list of all the donations you receive from him. And Feinstein said, well, no, I'll certainly take a look, which is political speech for, no, she's just going to go ahead and keep that money. And hypocrisy be darned. All right, let's take some phone calls. James in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. I wanted to know if you knew about that deal that went on, and after, like, just hours after the Vegas shooting, how they were talking about the metal detectors and everything. And how do you see that turning out? Like, how do you see the TSA being in every park, in every hotel room? Well, not hotel room, but hotel. And also, like, how you were saying it's one big, elitist clique. The left loves this idea, of more security and more, put this there, put that there, and that just shows you it's both working together, because who's going to make all the money off those things? And who's going to end up having to dish out the extra cost it's going to take, to put them in, the prices for hotels, the prices for everything else,
Yeah, it's going to come out of the hotel.
They're not going to have to go through that stuff.
Yeah, it's going to come out of the hotel guest pocket, and I can imagine that the casinos aren't going to be very happy about that, because that means less money for these people to gamble with. And most of those big Las Vegas hotels already have very intense security, because they realize they're targets for acts of terror, And we put up an article about some of the security at one of these hotels. It is amazing. I mean, they've got former SEALs in there. They're constantly in communication with the Department of Homeland Security. There are hidden cameras and metal detectors. And a lot of people are saying it is just unbelievable that this paddock could have gotten all these weapons up to that room without being noticed by security. And it's another reason to doubt the official story.
Yeah, you just answered it right there. There's a whole bunch of special forces, ex-government, whatever. That's why the hotels don't care about their guests, because Las Vegas makes more money, at least that city makes more money on money laundering than, the average tourist going over there. And that's another thing. You could also tell that the story is fake, because the city of Las Vegas itself, security-wise, is equivalent to London or New York. That's
probably even more so. Probably even more so. Probably even more so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen.
Yeah.
Okay, James, thank you for the call. We're going to let you go and switch over to James in Atlanta. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I had two questions, one about Bill Cosby and one about Weinstein.
Yes.
If you had an update on Bill Cosby, and then on Weinstein, does he face any criminal charges, and can his studio have any suits brought against them because he was an employee when all this stuff happened?
Well, certainly, I don't know what the statute of limitations are on some of these sexual harassment cases, but certainly he could be charged for sexual assault. And as far as his production company, I'm not really sure that they would be seen as responsible for controlling his behavior, especially since he was the boss.
What if they covered it up, though? They kept getting complaints, and they tried to bury some of it from coming out.
Well, a lot of that was definitely going on. If you think back to that story I just mentioned about the New York Times, and it's entirely possible that you could make a case that they did aid and abet his behavior over the years.
In some of Bill Cosby's cases, they went back to the 70s, I think. They really went back in time on that.
Well, again, I don't know what the statute of limitations are for these specific crimes. I mean, going back to that one about him pleasuring himself in front of this Fox News reporter, I think at most that's indecent exposure, and I don't know that that has a very long statute of limitations. Again, we're going to have to look at who's actually going to bring charges against him and what the lawyers are going to say. Certainly he has enough money where he can just get out of all of this without a court settlements.
Well, it's great to actually judge stood up. And thanks again, Mike, for the show, and I hope you have a great day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And again, I think the important thing here is to understand that people in positions of wealth and power, whether it's entertainment or political, are very often quite different in their private lives than their public persona would lead you to. And again, going back to my own experience, I met a lot of people who were truly wonderful people. And I met a lot of people who you just think they're the most wonderful human being when you see them on TV or the movies, and they turn out to be complete and total jerks. And yes, I am aware of big, major, bankable stars who've literally gotten away with murder because there's a lot of money there, and as long as they're making money, they're going to be okay. And I know there's a number of books out on like Hollywood Babylon about some of the stuff that's been going on out there. All right, we're going to switch over to Clint in Las Vegas. Clint, I'm probably going to have to take you through the next commercial break, but what's on your mind?
Yeah, please do. Hillary Clinton, somebody who's, public persona, she's wonderful and all that, but behind the scenes. Anyways, I just sent you a Steve Wynn talks security at his casinos, and it's a video interview he did, and he specifically talked about this, how he used CIA people, Embassy Marines, Navy SEALs, and not to mention hidden metal detectors at all the exits. And we're supposed to believe the MGM uses Bozo the Clown security. And the insurance companies wouldn't allow that.
Well, again,
How- such a
again,
discrepancy.
prior to the fire, I got to see behind the scenes at the MGM Grand when I was working there, and yeah, the security is just amazingly tight. They're out there to catch the cheats. Stay on the line, Clint. Going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Clint in Las Vegas. I'm looking through this material that you sent here, and yeah, they're talking about the hidden metal detectors at all the entrances and exits. There are visible cameras to let you know you're being watched. There are hidden cameras. And again, the casinos, they're concerned about terrorism. They're also very concerned about cheating. And they watch those hallways and elevators very carefully to make sure that somebody isn't going to a room with too many computers and other electronic type devices because they're trying to spot cheaters. There was that big story where the MIT students worked out a way to sort of game blackjack in reverse. And the casinos keep an eye out for that. So the security is very intense. And like I said, years and years ago, when I was working as a magician, I worked at the original MGM Grand before the big fire. And one of my computer teachers had stopped teaching and was now the IT director for the MGM. So I got the whole tour, the whole back thing, and I was just absolutely amazed about the eye in the sky and all this other security. So again, it really strains credibility to think this one guy got all those weapons up to the room undetected, and there are more and more people who are coming on out and saying there had to be additional people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Well, not only that, Mike. Oh. Yeah, Mike?
You're on the air.
Yeah, Mike.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, not only that, you stockpile a bunch of guns just so a bunch of people can go down to the casino and rob the joint. My brother, when I lived in Las Vegas, he had mental issues, and the doctors had him on all these kooky pills. And well, to make a long story short, he'd act goofy, and we'd go to a casino, and he started getting 86 from a couple of these casinos for acting goofy. It got to a point where we couldn't go to I couldn't take my brother to a casino to go out to dinner or something. Sometimes they would meet him at the door, and he'd never been there before. I mean, these guys were good.
Oh, they have a master list. Yeah, all the casinos, right. they all sign on to this master list of people who are banned from the casinos, and that includes just people who are just simply winning too much. You know, they only want the consistent losers in there. Really expert players who can like count the cards and everything. It's perfectly legal, but they'll still block you. They'll still kick you out. There are even psychics on the list.
That's another thing. He's the luckiest gambler in the world. I think he won like $5 million. He'd be booted for that alone. Another thing. Did you see the video that somebody sent that this guy may still be alive? That somebody had a sheet of paper and he had the date on it, and right across the table was this guy. He looked just like him in Atlantic City. It was last Friday, and he was drinking a beer with this Filipino girl playing blackjack. And it sure looked like him. I'll send you one.
Yeah, send me that one. I hadn't seen that one yet, but again, we need to be careful because right now, the perpetrators of this false flag, the perpetrators of the false flag, they're pouring out all kinds of junk to try and trip people up. You've probably seen all these photos and videos of these additional windows that are broken on the side of the hotel, but they face away from the concert venue. And we don't know when the video was actually taken. So they're just putting out all kinds of junk, that this guy was CIA or he was ISIS or he was Antifa, he was selling drugs, he was running guns. And if you look at it, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, if you're going to do a gun deal, you do it out in the middle of the desert. You don't do it in the middle of a hotel.
Have you seen a surveillance video yet? I have not.
I'm sorry?
Have you seen one? Have you seen a surveillance video released yet? I have not.
No, I haven't seen any surveillance videos from inside the hotel that show this paddock, lugging all these guns into the room.
Now, somebody said last week on your show that the Mandalay Bay cannot be held accountable because he shot across the property, the property line.
Clint, I'm going to have to put you on hold again. I'm sorry, the commercial breaks come tight at the bottom of the hour, so stay on the line. We'll be right back with you. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking with Clint in Las Vegas, and your email with that video just arrived, and it does look like Stephen Paddock there, but on the other hand, we don't really know when the video was shot. It could have been it could be a year old for all we know. We're just being told, oh, this was Friday night, he's still alive, and like I said, the perpetrators of this false flag, they're desperate to throw as much garbage out there to try and keep people confused. No plane at the Pentagon or all this other nonsense they put out there to poison the well. So, again, the security in Las Vegas is very, very intense. They're concerned about terror. They're also concerned, as you said, that many guns in a room could mean an attempt to literally rob the cash cage in the hotel. That's happened before as well. So, they keep an eye out for that kind of thing. Clint, are you there? Okay, apparently we lost Clint. Let's switch over to Andy in Texas. Aloha, Andy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha snack bar, my friend. One of the things that I see that's quite attributing to all of this is, all we ever saw was pictures of the guy who did this shooting. And over the weekend I actually saw a body, but they failed to show the face. Okay, and we've not yet seen any video of a body bag coming out of the casino, nor have we had any mainstream media or anybody trying to get a picture of that body bag, A, and B, trying to get a picture of the person that was in the body bag. So we virtually don't know who the shooter is at this point, as far as I'm concerned, and I've been paying attention to this, and we really don't know who the shooter is. And then Two Windows, 64 years old. I'm not to disintegrate anybody is 64 years old. I know a lot of people that are 64 years old that can, handle themselves and stuff. But I mean, two rooms. I think we've identified that it has been two rooms. It's not one room.
Yes.
So, I mean, to look at this thing, and another thing, I mean, who was the person who brought all these people together? A lot of people are saying that this was a hit at Middle America, who elected Donald Trump and stuff. So why didn't they go after Jason Aldean? He's the one who brought them all together. Let's get rid of Jason Aldean so we can't bring all these people together. But then
hang on a second. If you look at the sight lines, okay, from the sniper's nest high up on the Mandalay Bay, they couldn't actually see the stage itself. And again, at 400 yards, hitting a specific target is going to be a real trick. You need something specifically manufactured for taking out specific targets at long distance, like a Barrett, something like that. With the AR, you can spray a crowd, and that's exactly what they did. So I think the fact that there was a second room and a second window tells us there was a second shooter, because why would this guy even waste the time running from room to room? He only needs one window out, and he's just going to stay there, and he's going to fire through that window. There's no reason for him to have had that second window. So that right there tells me there was a second person.
Well, and then that's the reason why I said that we've only seen pictures of this guy, and then we listened to his brother, who was almost, I don't know. I mean, wow. I guess I don't know how people react to their brother being killed for shooting thousands of people or hundreds of people or whatever. I don't know how this person particularly would react, but he certainly reacted out of context to what I would have probably.
Well, let me share a personal insight from when I lost my youngest brother.
What happened?
Well, he died. He was on a health kick. He'd gone to the doctors. They had him on statins. And all of a sudden, he suffered a stroke. And then 3 months later, he suffered a massive heart attack and he died. And it did come as a bit of a shock. And for the first few days after I got the news, I was in shock. It was dazed. It was like I wasn't really accepting it yet. And when I finally did, I broke down and cried on my wife and everything. It was difficult to get through. But getting on back to the Mandalay Bay, again, he couldn't see the stage. He could just spray into the crowd. They could just spray into the crowd. And this idea that they were there to get all these Trump lovers really kind of falls apart, because apparently most of the people who came to that concert had come from California. And so it's a safe assumption that probably the shooters were shooting a lot of Hillary supporters and liberals as well. Okay? Did we just lose Andy? Okay, there seems to be a problem with our phone system here. We're going to take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the phone lines, and because I had a lot of news to get through. Kathleen in Paris, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I probably need to turn down my speaker.
Couldn't hurt.
I'm going to talk about Las Vegas, too, and the fact that, as we know, when they have these false flags, like most of them, they're just by an amazing coincidence happens to be some emergency drill going on.
Yes.
So there's crisis actors around and all that, so people understand, it's a drill, so they don't get upset. So that's complicated this situation, because there are some fake victims, which are crisis actors, who are supposed to be there pretending to be victims, and they're hauled into the hospital, and sometimes the doctors would say, there's no entry wound and there's no exit wound, get this guy out of here. But then there's the real victims. So seems to be it's a bit.
Well, there was that strange Craigslist ad for event actors in Las Vegas, and of course it's now been taken down. There's a scrub all over the internet going on. They're trying to erase all the original videos taken by the people who were there to try and reinforce that story. So the perpetrators of this false flag, they're in a panic. They're not getting the reaction from the public that they wanted. Okay?
Yeah. Did you know about the top 4 floors of the Mandalay Hotel is kind of like a hotel inside a hotel because it's private owners?
Yes.
And just by chance they happen to be Saudi, but I'm not saying anything about, Saudis are involved in this. I don't know.
No, they just got the money, A lot of the big a lot of the big hotels down in Waikiki have started doing the same thing, where the top floors with all the luxury suites, they're actually turning them into condos now. And so you can stay at the hotel, but you can't stay at the top floors because those are now all private residences. We actually shot a couple of episodes of Lost up in one of those, and it was plush. Oh, was that nice.
It just occurred to me that because there's no video of him anybody taking guns up. What if they came down?
They have to go up before they can come down.
I know, but they could have gone up in a completely separate hotel. They've got separate entrances and separate elevators and all that.
They still got cameras. They still got cameras.
Those
people living on those top floors are more concerned about security than your average casino visitor, and so I would imagine that probably security is even tighter up there, with key cards and everything. Anyway, Kathleen, I'm going to let you go, and I think we've talked enough about Las Vegas. At this point, the safe presumption, given the recent history of the United States government, is this was another false flag to push the gun grabber agenda. It appears to be falling flat on its face. I do have one other comment, and that was when Clint brought up the issue about how somebody called into the show saying that the Mandalay Bay could not be held negligent in the shooting deaths because the shooting deaths actually took place off the property. Well, I keep thinking back to all these lawsuits that were brought against the gun manufacturers and gun dealers for the crimes committed with the guns that were made and sold by them. Now, most of those lawsuits wound up getting tossed out of court, but clearly the people who were the victims of those gun crimes were not actually in the gun store or the gun manufacturing place when it actually happened. So there is apparently some kind of a legal argument that says you can be negligent even if the results of your negligence happen someplace else. If you're negligent, for example, maintaining an airliner and it crashes in another country, the families of the passengers can still sue the airline for negligence, even though the deaths happen someplace else. So I think that lawyer who called on in, maybe he's just a big fan of the Mandalay Bay. But again, I think there would be grounds to bring a lawsuit against the Mandalay Bay for allowing this to happen. And certainly Las Vegas as a whole would be a lot happier if all this stuff went away. Because already they're getting cancellations. People don't want to go there. They're convinced that there may be follow-up attacks. And there may be. The gun grabbers are not going to quit. And my concern is that not having gotten the American people to go along with this false flag, there may be more of them on the way. Until finally everybody says, okay, stop shooting at us. We'll let you have our guns. Moving on here, we're going to close the phone lines for a while, like I said, because I got a lot of stuff to talk about. Over in Syria, the Syrian army has regained control over the Palmyra-Deir ez-Zor highway, and they've managed to repel all the ISIS attacks along that highway, and they've restored control over the supply line to government forces operating near Deir ez-Zor city. So this is, a major win for them. Now, the situation inside Mayadin remains unclear. Some sources report that ISIS is withdrawing from the area under the threat of being encircled by government forces, and there may not be any U.S. forces there to open an escape corridor for them. But apparently no photos or videos showing these troops deep inside the city are available online. If Mayadin has been recaptured by the Syrian authorities, it is a major blow to ISIS in the Euphrates Valley. This thing is all but over. And we may be seeing a situation in which the U.S. is going to go in with a decapitation strike against Assad. And the reason I say that is because there was a very strange article that came out earlier today about North Korea in which Trump said diplomacy won't work, there are no valid military options, we have to go for regime change. Well, the only way he's going to get a regime change is to bomb Kim Jong-un. And if they're starting to think that way, forget about war against North Korea, Iran, or Syria, we're just going to bomb Damascus, Tehran, and Pyongyang. A lot of people are very, very concerned about Trump's comment that he made about the calm before the storm. And nobody's really saying anything, but it definitely seems to indicate that something might be getting ready to happen. Now, a small Turkish army reconnaissance team has crossed the border into Syria's northwestern province of Idlib ahead of a planned deployment of the Ankara-backed so-called Free Syrian Army Forces in the largely militant-held region. So Turkey is waiting back on in, and this may be to help the U.S. Turn the tide of war back against Assad. So it's definitely getting on out there. Hezbollah has accused the United States of using the Air Force to protect ISIS. And Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the Lebanese Shiite paramilitary group Hezbollah, has said the United States is using its Air Force to protect the militants of the Islamic State terrorist group in Syria from the Syrian armed forces. And he said, quote, the United States protects Daesh in several Syria's regions and prevents the Syrian army to end with the terrorists by using their aircraft. So basically, Hezbollah is saying the U.S. is working to make sure ISIS is not totally wiped on out. Remember way back when we were all being told ISIS were the bad guys? And they're trying to remind us ISIS are the bad guys. And yes, we're giving them weapons and food and ammunition, but remember, ISIS are the bad guys. They were even trying to link the Las Vegas shooter to ISIS. Getting on over to Iran, a lot of people are very nervous about that. The deadline for certifying the Iran deal is the 15th. And officially, they're going to announce a decision this week, but it's already leaked on out that Trump is going to decertify the deal. And it's not on the basis of Iran having failed to keep all of its commitments, because they have, and the IAEA has confirmed that they have. It's Donald Trump coming on out there and saying, well, you know, I'm going to do a better deal than what Obama did. And what he's actually showing is that deals made by the U.S. government cannot be trusted. Now, the German foreign minister is out there saying that if Trump unilaterally pulls out of the Iran deal, the world is literally going to change, and we're going to see a renewed chaos over in that part of the world. Now, most of the other members who signed that deal want to stick with it. They want to work to keep that deal in place. It's not going to happen. When the U.S. pulls on out and starts putting more sanctions on Iran, Iran is going to say the deal is broken. In fact, it's already broken. Iran kept all their commitments. The U.S. did not. They did not remove all the sanctions and instead have added new sanctions on there. It's the U.S. government that has been acting in bad faith. The Kremlin is out there saying the U.S. exit from the nuclear deal will have negative consequences, and they're absolutely correct. This is just going to kick up a whole mess in that part of the world, and again, it just seems like the war hawks are out there saying, let's just go to war against Iran. Yeah, we've been talking about it for years. Let's just go ahead and do it. And North Korea and Syria, we can just take them all on at the same time. No, you can't. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about Iran. And Iran, unfortunately, is starting to mouth off in the vein of Kim Jong-un, and I wish they wouldn't. Iran is now saying that if Trump ends the nuclear deal, and the new sanctions are passed, which they're already talking about in Congress, that every U.S. base within the 2,000-kilometer range of Iran's missiles are at risk. Now, of course, if Iran were to do that, that would give the U.S. government the excuse they've been looking for years and years and years to go on in and smash up Iran here. Iran, meanwhile, has dismissed claims that they are in any way, shape, or form involved with North Korea's nuclear program. And they keep coming on back to the thing, we gave up our nuclear program. The IAEA has confirmed it. All of our enriched uranium went to Russia. This is just more propaganda, demonizing Iran to make us look like we're a threat to the world. And Iran is not the threat to the world right now. Anybody paying attention realizes it's the United States government that's the threat to the world. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in over 200 years. In the case of the Iran-Iraq war, Iraq initiated. And I know there's a lot of people in the government saying, well, when they threw out the Shah in 1979, that was a challenge to our interests. This was a people taking back their country from a foreign puppet ruler. And I think we can probably agree that every nation has a right to self-determination. It's even in the UN, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And if you're being ruled by a government that rules you on behalf of a foreign power, then obviously you don't have self-determination. What you have is taxation without representation. Just think about that for a while. So Iran is starting to talk real tough, which I wish they would not do, but again, they may feel they're in a corner. They may feel that they've been backed into a corner and they can't retreat anymore. The Iranian people may be saying, this is as far as we're willing to kowtow to Washington, D.C. I imagine many of the North Koreans or the Syrians or the Libyans or the Yemenites are feeling exactly the same thing right now. Meanwhile, over in Israel, they have launched artillery attacks on alleged Hamas positions in the Gaza Strip. And Israel is claiming that the attacks were launched in response to rocket fire from the Gaza Strip. Actually, it was one rocket, and it didn't even make it out of Gaza. Didn't even hit Israel. And Israel uncorks on them. And this, too, is a pattern we've seen before. Little tiny rocket hits nothing but empty dirt, and Israel uncorks on the Palestinian people. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2 here. And getting on back to the news, there's been a news story just over at Natural News where apparently somebody has done a forensic analysis of the sounds of gunfire at the concert venue. And they have apparently discovered evidence there were at least 2 shooters, one of which was considerably closer than the Mandalay Bay. Now, that doesn't rule out a second shooter at the Mandalay Bay. But they're saying that they're going to have a video with all of this data is going to be put out sometime today. And they're saying that there was a shooter basically adjacent to the concert venue, relatively low down. And that matches with the testimony of one of the injured that said he was shot from close range on a flat trajectory. So we'll see what comes out of that. Getting on back to the war zones here. Apparently, there's an organization called Railfan. They're train spotters, and there are people who think trains are fascinating, and I'm one of them. When Claire and I lived in Washington State, we were involved with a railway museum that was a lot of fun. Shot a documentary for them. And so Railfan is an organization where anything that's interesting that's going to be happening, they send out notifications and people will go down to the tracks and they'll watch something roll by. Well, apparently, a train laden with U.S. tanks rolled through the Vogtland heading to Dresden or Leipzig. And what was interesting was there was no announcement that this was going to happen. And apparently this author, Gero Fellauer, was just out for a stroll and just happened to see the train and photographed it with the cell phone. So there's a lot of hardware moving into Europe here, and that's got to be making the Russians very, very nervous indeed. Now, the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier, along with the usual escorts, guided missile cruiser, nuclear-powered submarine, are on their way to the Korean Peninsula to prepare for a potential war with North Korea, while Pyongyang reportedly plans new missile tests. Now, the sun is up over there in North Korea. It is the 10th. It's the big celebration for the founding of their political party. No word yet on a missile launch, but there was a lot of propaganda going on out that this one might be armed with a nuclear warhead, that they were going to pop off over the Pacific to send a message to the United States. It's a lot of fear-mongering here. Now, I'm expecting there will be a test of a missile, but that's going to be it. And again, they're trying to make a big deal over provocations of countries testing missiles. Every nation tests their weapons to make sure they're going to hit what they're aimed at and not hit something they're not aimed at. Unlike those Tomahawks Trump sent into that Syrian air base. Now, apparently, South Korea and the U.S. are going to start military exercises on October 20th. And what's really kind of troubling about this is they have not announced an end date. Normally, when countries hold military exercises, in order to avoid confusion, they will say, we are having military exercises, we are going to be here, we're starting at this time, and we will be ending on this time. And that way everybody relaxes and realizes it is a military exercise. Meanwhile, Great Britain is preparing for the possibility of war breaking out with North Korea. So they're getting ready to just wade on in. Oh, it's another war. It's going to be fun. No, it's not going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of death. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, there was an interesting article came out earlier today in which Trump was saying diplomacy is not going to work. There are no viable military options, so we're going for regime change. Well, again, the only way he can bring about regime change in North Korea is to kill the current leader. And there is already a lot of talk about leaders threatening other leaders with assassination. Now, one of the big questions right now is, what is China going to do in the midst of all of this? And as you know, the United States tried to basically drag China into the middle of this. And China said, we don't want to have anything to do with this. You created this mess. You will deal with it. And furthermore, if the U.S. attacks North Korea preemptively, unprovoked, China feels they will have to intervene. Now, China really doesn't want to intervene. They have other things that they need to be spending their money and resources on. But again, China may feel that it too is backed into a corner, because a U.S. presence in North Korea is just another sign of the U.S. attempt to encircle both Russia and China as a means of preventing the ruble and the yuan from further encroachment onto the U.S. hegemonic domination of the world's economy. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Interesting little article came out of the original antiwar.com saying that we shouldn't really worry about military action in North Korea because what we have here are two leaders with big mouths. And, you know, Trump will get on his Twitter account, and Trump can tweet all he wants. It's not going to stop North Korea's testing of their weapons. And so it's all about rhetoric. We have these verbal extravagances of these two leaders whose entire modus operandi depends on a constant stream of bluster, bluff, and unmitigated bovine excrement. Maybe, 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 maybe. Because at some point, one of these leaders is going to say, the time for rhetoric is over, and they're going to pull a trigger. And I think North Korea is waiting to see if Trump stumbles. Certainly the fact that even his own party is out for his hide is known all over the world. Getting on back to this issue with Russia Today and other Russian media, they really are trying to go back to the Cold War, the Red Scare. The commies are coming to get you. Well, they're not communist anymore. Well, the Russians are coming to get you. And they're bringing back a lot of the tactics of McCarthyism. And apparently now the U.S. Wants to designate Russian media with a Nazi-era designation of foreign agents. They're foreign agents operating inside our soil. Russia's already saying if the U.S. does that, they in turn will designate Western media operating inside Russia as foreign agents. So it's another little tit-for-tat escalation going on. First it was the diplomats, now it's the media. Meanwhile, a lot of people are starting to really notice how the big corporate social media is now clearly hand in glove with the U.S. government the way the corporate media is. And we're seeing this report where YouTube has basically shut down all independent media coverage of the Las Vegas shooting, trying to protect the official narrative. In fact, I got an email from somebody saying he was trying to post the video of one of my shows where I was talking about Las Vegas, and YouTube just blocked it, wouldn't let it be posted. So we're seeing YouTube, and for that matter, Facebook and the other social media are out there trying to protect the orthodox account, to protect the official story from anybody who might be out there not believing, as we're told to believe, asking questions. And of course, when they do that, people start to notice that's what's going on. Over in my online store, we have a coffee mug. We've had it there for years. And it says right on the front, the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it, and that's what's going on right now. There is nothing the U.S. government, corporate media, social media can do that isn't telegraphing the fact that censorship has come to the United States of America. First Amendment, what First Amendment? You have a right to freedom of speech, but only as long as you're saying things we approve of. Well, that's not freedom of speech, that's permitted speech. All right, let's talk about the economic news. A lot of very troubling things are going on. Apparently, report in King World News, a Swiss bank has announced it will no longer hand over clients' physical gold. Now, think about that for a moment. First, it was New York Federal Reserve and the Bank of France with Germany's gold, and now apparently it's being done to banking customers in Switzerland, where a customer will deposit physical gold in a bank. And apparently what really got everything going was this client of this bank wanted to transfer the physical gold he had put in the bank to a private vault company. And the bank said, we don't actually have it. We'll have to try and acquire it. And apparently, the bank is now saying that they have the option, if you deposit physical metal in their institution, that they can basically convert it into paper metals. And we know those paper contracts are way, way, way over leveraged. And Swiss banks are doing all they can to stop clients taking their physical gold out. One major bank refused to transfer gold out if the client isn't present. Another major bank recently told the client that they don't transfer client gold out of the bank to anyone, even if the client demands it. So it sounds to me like somebody's been playing fast and loose with the gold again. We know that's been going on in the New York Fed. We know it's been going on in the Bank of England. We know it's been going on in the Bank of France. And now apparently the Swiss banks. So what may be happening is the Swiss banks have been using their clients' physical gold as security for transactions. And maybe some of these transactions didn't work on out. So if you're going to invest in metals, and I recommend it highly, keep it under your own control. You can't even trust it in a bank right now. And a lot of people are buying gold. Russia's doubled their gold purchases this last month here. Down in the Perth Mint, their gold coin sales doubled in September. So everybody knows getting onto these gold coins is a good idea. And a little helpful reminder, okay, if you're going to buy gold coins, they lose their value if you eat that chocolate bit out of the middle. I learned that one the hard way. So be careful. Apparently, Turkish Airlines has now canceled 40 Dreamliner aircraft orders from Boeing. Was worth $11 billion deal, and is now talking with Bombardier. Apparently, a lot of concerns still out there that the Dreamliner is still not perfectly safe, even though that they've replaced the lithium batteries. But there is a concern. And again, there's also that growing hostility between Turkey and the United States government. And that's really going to start hurting our economy. There are countries that do not want to do business with us anymore as the U.S. gets more aggressive in its warmongering. And these so-called global trade treaties, Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, were an attempt to lock in trade ahead of a deterioration of relations between the United States and the rest of the world. Now, the European Union are starting to really crank up, pedal to the metal, the backroom talks with the Labour Party. Apparently, their concern is that Theresa May's government will collapse before Brexit is complete. Apparently, Theresa May is having trouble holding on to her coalition. Angela Merkel's having trouble even starting one here. Nigel Farage is basically berating Hillary Clinton. She attacked Brexit voters, claiming they fell for a horrible lie, and voted against modern Britain because of those small town concerns. Because, you know, people in small towns, they're not very smart. And, of course, the former First Lady is blaming her election loss on the email scandal. Well, hey, you used that server. That was your choice. Got to own that one. And, of course, Russian influence. So she's got some ambitions for the future. Most candidates for president, when they lose, if they don't have a job in Congress to go back to, they just sort of take a deep breath, and it's sort of been a tradition that they stay kind of quiet. Not Hillary. Or for that matter, Barack Obama. They're out there pushing the liberal cause as hard as they can. So you have to wonder what's going on. I'm still concerned about Antifa and November 4th, although, again, as I mentioned, Antifa claimed that they were going to be on a rampage across the country defacing Christopher Columbus statues. I'm not hearing any reports that it's actually happening today. So we'll see. Now, the Catalonia fever, if you want to call it that, or the Crimea fever, is starting to spread, and next up is Bavaria. We did mention the other day when we were going through the list of regions of Europe that might seek to break away. And we're getting a little confirmation here from Sputnik News that Bavaria is thinking they want to leave Germany as well. And they really are a very different place from the rest of Germany. So they're talking about stay or go. They're talking about having an independence referendum. Now, Merkel, as I said before, she's having trouble forming a new coalition government, and she's already having to make some concessions. And apparently she has agreed to put a cap on immigration to start limiting the number of people coming into Germany, trying to unite her conservative camp ahead of forming a new coalition. Whether she'll keep that promise or not, we don't know. But at least she's actually conceding that it might have to happen. Remember, when she was campaigning, she was talking about, we might want to think about scaling back on immigration. And again, another campaign promise, not worth the air that she expended putting on out there. Now, as you know, down in Catalonia, the Spanish government is issuing veiled threats to the Catalan leader. A spokesman for the ruling People's Party basically came on out with a veiled death threat. And this is not a time when you should be avoiding the possibility of diplomacy, but it's an open declaration. They're thinking about assassinating the Catalan leader. And hopefully it'll be replaced by somebody who'll just say, well, we were only kidding about independence. But apparently Spain has already sent military forces into Catalonia. They're apparently positioned to take control of significant infrastructure assets. This thing is probably going to explode into a civil war over there. But interestingly enough, if you look at the map of Spain and Catalonia, and then you move north into France, to the French region of Pyrenees Orientales, a lot of people call it Northern Catalonia. And this was taken over by France in the 17th century, but they maintain close cultural links with Catalonia to the south, and now they're talking about independence. It's a growing trend around the world, and I applaud it. We have seen lately the larger imperial governments become, the more abusive they are of their own people, and the more hostile they are toward the rest of the world. I think Earth would be much better off as a planet with 1,000 little, tiny, small nations, each taking care of their own needs. And yes, there'd be trade across borders and tourism and preservation of cultural identity. And you wouldn't have these large empires trying to conquer it all like we have now. Meanwhile, thousands of Catholics formed a human chain and prayed on the border of Poland against the Islamization of Europe. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today. And a lot of people have been talking about the late-night so-called comedians that are constantly attacking Donald Trump. And frankly, we're a little bit less than delicate about what happened in Las Vegas. And so, to nobody's surprise, the ratings for these anti-Trump late-night comedian show hosts have hit rock bottom. People just don't want to tune into them anymore. And Claire and I are like that. We used to watch a Daily Show when Jon Stewart was on it. And ever since, it's just liberal this, liberal that. Oh, we tuned it on out. Get bored hearing the same thing over and over and over again. Now, apparently, the California wildfires are still spinning out of control. And, boy, doesn't it feel like this country is being whooped on by the forces of nature? Wildfires here, hurricanes here, just all over the place. It's nasty. Okay, now then. Story coming out of 12160.info about always reading the fine print because, as you know, liberals are pushing for new gun control legislation to basically ban any mechanism that increases the rate of fire of a semi-automatic weapon. And they're just not bump stocks. Feinstein wants anything, cranks, hellfire triggers, anything that allows you to fire more quickly. She wants it banned. And again, for a real criminal or a real terrorist, they're not going to obey those laws. They're disarming ordinary law-abiding citizens. By the way, talk about an epic media fail. CNN did a story about, bump stocks. And they illustrated it with a story with this very mean-looking individual holding an AR derivative. And it had a grenade launcher on the front. And no bump stock. It was an adjustable stock, but that's not a bump stock. And they were out there saying, see, these are the bad things. I'm surprised they didn't have a 100-round banana clip curling up there. But they're trying to demonize the guns. It wasn't the guns. It was Paddock, or whoever put him up to it or used him as a patsy. Now, the reality here is that since 2016, the police have killed 3 times as many citizens than the last 4 decades of mass shootings combined. And every time you have somebody like Paddock who opens fire on a crowd, they say, take away the guns from the people, take away the guns from the people. But every time there's an unjust shooting of an innocent by a police officer, well, it's in compliance with department policy. You want to stop the mass death, disarm the police officers. I mean, for the longest time, the British police didn't even carry guns. They didn't feel they needed them. They didn't actually need them. Now, starting next year, when you are traveling within the United States of America, you will still need your passport if you are departing from or flying to 9 specific states which have not yet complied with the real ID requirements of the federal government. And so TSA in those states will not allow you to board a flight with your state-issued ID. You're going to have another form of identification, a passport, a permanent resident card, a green card, or a military ID. And again, real criminals and real terrorists, they can get that stuff faked. There's a big business in fake documents. Nation states have whole departments that do nothing but do that. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. My mistake, I misread the clock here. Boy, it gets tired out here. All right, now we're coming up here on the start of our commercial break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines, so if you want to call on in, and we'll talk about all kinds of interesting things. Speaking of interesting things, somebody just sent me a link to a document over on Scribd, and it's basically plans for making something called the Lightning Link. Now, I'm not recommending that you actually do this because, as I understand the gun laws, putting this thing into your AR-15 is a crime in and of itself. But again, in an emergency, civil war, Antifa uprising, whatever, the whole point of this is you can make one of these in about an hour. And that's why banning bump stocks is pointless. Because people will always figure out new ways to get the maximum performance out of their weapons in order to deal with an oncoming horde that is intent on taking their food, their money, their spouses, their freedoms, and so forth and so on. Now, apparently, it's already a good ski season all over the northern hemisphere. Ski areas in the Alps have got 20 centimeters of fresh snow in the past 24 hours. And around 15 glacier ski areas are already open and have great conditions. Gosh darn that human-caused global warming. So, now, looking back at Fukushima, there's no question it is the world's worst nuclear disaster. And they're never going to clean it up. Now, after it happened, Japan announced a moratorium on nuclear power, which was very hard because much of their economy depended on it. But apparently, Japan's nuclear regulator has approved an application from Tokyo Electric Power, TEPCO, to restart two of the reactors at Kashiwazaki Kariwa. This is the world's biggest nuclear plant. And they're going to restart these reactors. And the question I would have is, have they taken any steps whatsoever to improve the survivability of these reactors? Have they built up the tsunami walls? Have they put the emergency generators on towers? Have they made sure that the Siemens digital controllers inside there are free of Stuxnet? Because right now we know the ring of fire is just rocking and rolling. There are quakes all over the place. And there's no reason that Japan couldn't get another major quake at any time. Now, over in Europe, there's been a bit of a stink because apparently there's a spike in radioactivity. It's found in the air in the Western and Central Europe, and it's primarily elevated levels of the isotope ruthenium-106, and it's been reported in Germany, Italy, Austria, Switzerland, and France. And nobody knows where it came from. Nobody's owning up to it. But wind calculations are indicating it may have been released in Eastern Europe. So maybe somebody had another nuclear accident and they're not talking about it. If you remember back when Chernobyl first happened, and the Soviet Union kept insisting, no, there's no problem. We don't know where the radioactivity is coming that's hitting Europe from our direction. I saw a documentary the other day about that town that was around the Chernobyl reactors. And when those people were finally evacuated, it was 24 hours before they were evacuated. When they were evacuated, they weren't told why. They were told they'd be back in a few days. So, anyway, let's take some phone calls. Dave in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Dave, are you there? There you are.
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine. You're a little bit muffled. You might want to put your mouth up closer to the microphone.
All right, is this any better?
That's much better. Thank you. What's on your mind today?
Okay, well, false flags in general. The way to tell that any of these shootings are a false flag from the deep state. Is they're always convicted immediately by the corporate media. They never say alleged shooter. They always just say the shooter immediately. And they're always dead, so there doesn't have to be a trial, because if there was a trial, these alphabet agencies would have a lot of egg on their face, I believe.
Yeah, that's part of the pattern.
Yeah, so I mean, it's easy to see. They're dead, they know exactly who it is, and they're convicted by the media, and no one questions it. It's so weird.
Well, I think everybody's questioning this one, and that's why the perpetrators of the false flag appear to be in a panic, where they're literally trying to scrub all of the first-person videos taken by the people at the concert off of the web. And there was a video, we put it up at What Really Happened earlier today. It's by somebody who's right there near the front of the stage, and he's panning around with, or she's panning around with the phone, and you can see the Mandalay Bay Hotel in the background. There are no muzzle flashes visible from that 32nd floor. Now, first of all, if you look at the guns in the photo of the room, they don't have any flash suppressors on them. But even if they did, flash suppressors are to protect the shooter's vision when shooting at night, not let him see that flash. A flash suppressor cannot hide a muzzle flash from the people being shot at. And so I think this is another significant piece of information.
Yeah, there's a lot of information, but will it ever end up on the corporate media where so many people, whether, I know you talk to a lot of people that are woken up and they question it, but I live in California. I know so many people that are so brainwashed by the corporate media, they never question anything. And also, I just want to let you know that just because someone's from California doesn't mean they're liberal. That's overrated. I don't know anyone that voted for Hillary myself. Mm-hmm. I mean, she cheated here in California, just like the GMO labeling was cheated. Plus, they did have a certain amount of people brainwashed, too. Oh, it'll be too expensive to label the GMO, So there's just one more thing I'd like to mention without you hanging up on me. I just want to let you know I was a non-believer of certain things that you don't believe in at one time. But then there was one night I was looking up at the full moon and a jet went by, and I saw a black city trace behind the jet, and I said, that's not right. I was so trusting of the government until then. So I started looking at these jets in the sky. One day they ribboned the sky. The sky was just ribboned, and by sunset there were things falling down to the ground, and it looked just like gnats flying around, but it was like little tiny particles.
Okay, well, let me back up here a little bit. First of all, at night, when a passenger jet or a military jet flies in front of the moon, when you see a contrail in the sky, it's going to be white, right? Well, that means it's diffusing the light hitting it, and the same applies during the nighttime. Contrails will cast shadows on the ground. In fact, it's very common for people who are flying in a passenger jet. If the sun is in the right part of the sky, they can see this line on the ground that represents the shadow of the contrail, and the same thing is going to apply relative to the moon. Now, depending upon atmospheric conditions, humidity, and so forth, under certain conditions, contrails from jets can last a very, very, very long time. Now, in the case of a commuter flight where the plane is going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, while it's doing that, the air mass is moving and the earlier contrails are pushed off to one side, and that's where you get this illusion of gridding that's going on up there in the sky. So, I mean, it's all...
Well, there were several jets that laid ribbon. I mean, there was hardly any space between them. And at night, I mean, right at sunset, you could see what was falling in the sky. And I understand you working at NASA and everything. You know a lot about this, but my understanding is contrail is made of water vapor, and it doesn't stay in front of the moon dark for very long, I would imagine.
Well, again, it depends on the atmospheric conditions, but contrails from planes do cast shadows on the ground, and that's just a reality. Dave, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, I want to just explain people with gold. It's not like something to make money on. It's like an investment. It's an insurance policy on your life. You know, you shouldn't buy it thinking you're going to be making like lots of money on it, because you know you're going to have. That's what you're going to need when, like, you know, the economy finally finishes off. You know.
Yes. Yeah, it's wealth preservation. It's not really an investment, but it is a wealth preserver. And as the fiat currency becomes debased, obviously the price of that gold in that debased fiat currency is going to go up, but that's not the same thing as actually earning a return. But it is good. People should be into metals. Silver, gold, even copper is becoming an investment metal now. Of course, you would need a huge amount of it. But I think everybody ought to be thinking about buying silver and gold. Small amounts, so there isn't a record, and keep it under your own control. Because I can guarantee you, if they ever successfully push this cashless society on us, it'll be in conjunction with a ban on owning physical metals of any inherent value. Because people will just start using that as a medium of exchange rather than go through those plastic cards.
Be your own bank. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. Just like what happened in Switzerland.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Hey, Mike, I want to switch gears. What's your take on the South Korean graphite bomb that sprinkles particles of graphite over a power line infrastructure in like North Korea to shut the electric? What happens if it's buried underground?
If it's buried underground, it's not going to work. It's not particles of graphite. It's actually based on a design the U.S. developed many, many years ago, where it is spools of graphite fiber. They start with cotton and they process it and they turn it into graphite. And the idea is that you use this on one of those outdoor transformer stations. They can't put those underground because of the heating problems. And the bomb goes off well above the power station, and all of these graphite ribbons, fibers unfurl, and they're like, 20, 30, 40 feet long, and they drop down over those exposed lines on the top of the transformer, and they short them all out. That's what a graphite bomb does.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch to Curtis in Nevada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I was listening to other sources on YouTube. You have someone that claiming that they had firing from the fuel storage tanks that were about 400 yards to the side of the stage, which to me makes a lot more sense in terms of effective, firing targets. And that this guy, Paddock, had done previous work as an operative as far as in the 80s, gun running in Afghanistan using airplanes. Okay, so to me this would, if that were true, this would be like a deep operative embedded long-term, and this would explain why he had money and that he would launder the money he had by claiming to be a professional successful gambler. What do you think about that?
Well, again, Occam's razor has to apply here, and there's no shadowy aspect about where he made his money. He worked his entire life. He invested. He got into real estate. He scored a couple of really big deals, and he took his money and he basically retired. Now, like I said earlier in the show, there's a lot of junk that's being thrown on out there to try and keep people confused or try and convince people that this guy was evil and nefarious and we shouldn't be concerned about whether he was set up as a patsy. And again, when you're a high roller at a casino, I know everyone has this idea that he's walking around with a bag of money and he puts the dirty money on the table and he wins and he puts the clean money in a different bag and things like that. It doesn't really work that way. The high rollers always have a line of credit at the casino. And so basically they have put money into the cash cage and they've got chips. or they can simply ask the pit boss, I want to draw something on my line of credit. So, and it was set up that way to prevent the casinos from being used for money laundering.
Well, also, but we've heard a lot of irregular type reports of the casinos themselves not wanting to. They report the amount of activity, but they don't report whether this guy was a real winner or always losing. To me, it just seems to be this guy doesn't even look like, he looks more like a disheveled homeless guy if you look at a lot of his photos.
Well, when people retire, they sort of give up that necktie and three-piece suit thing. Again, as a matter of fact, somebody did leak out his tax records from the IRS, because when you win big at Vegas, it has to be reported to the taxing authorities, and apparently he was a regular winner. At one point, he won $40,000 on a single pull of the machine, of a slot machine. And like I said, right now they're trying to just tarnish this guy's reputation so that people will just accept that he was this evil person who would do this kind of thing. But none of it stands up to close examination. It's all speculation and rumor and innuendo. And it's part of that pattern of trying to destroy any possible sympathy for this guy in the room, so that people will not be all that curious about, are we being told the truth this time?
Right, but I'm not saying that he was the lone shooter. I'm saying that he could have been used as a long-term asset that at some point eliminate him by setting him up to do this.
Okay, and
what
is your evidence he was a long-term asset for anybody? Because I've seen this guy linked to FBI, CIA, ISIS, Antifa, and they're just, it's a tarnish job. They're trying to, okay? So, there's a lot of people making these claims, but a lot of them are the same people who told us Saddam had nuclear weapons. Okay.
Well, we both agree that the deep state,
absent some actual hard evidence, I'm not buying any of it. Occam's razor applies here. The simplest explanation is usually the correct one. This guy was set up and used as a patsy for a gun grabber false flag.
Agree.
Okay, that's where we stop. That's where we stop.
But the deep state, I'm just saying, the deep state, we agree.
Okay, we're going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. Take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and getting on back to the news. Apparently, over in Madagascar, they're dealing with bubonic plague. Apparently, over 20 people have died, and the World Health Organization is over there trying to deal with that. And as our society, if you will, degrades, we're seeing more and more of this all around. Down in San Diego, they've got this huge hepatitis outbreak, 481 cases, mostly within the homeless population. And they're not sure where it came from or even how it's spreading, because normally it's spread with needles here. But apparently this San Diego hepatitis A outbreak is among the nation's worst in decades. Worse, it's on the verge of a statewide epidemic, because it's not just San Diego. They're getting cases up there in Los Angeles, Santa Cruz, San Francisco, and Sacramento. So this is major, major league. Where did it come from? Well, it might have come on over the border, those open borders, because these refugees are not being given medical screenings. The illegal immigrants certainly aren't. I mean, back in the heyday of American immigration, people coming to this country still had to go through Ellis Island, and they had to have a medical check to keep these kind of diseases out of our country. And they just dropped the ball on that one. And it's another reason why this push for globalism and open borders, it sounds really good, and the liberals love it. They don't think it through to its potential consequences. They don't look at the pitfalls. Their attitude is, well, there may be some problems, but really, we have the ideal, what we dream of. We're dreaming a better world, and we're making it happen. No, you're not. Here in the United States of America and over in Europe, life is actually in decline from all the violence, the economic strain. I don't know what these open borders globalist people thought was going to happen, but they're clearly not getting it, and that's why there's this huge pushback. People want to have a nation. They want a national identity. They don't want to be part of this huge, faceless, global, socialistic crowd. People naturally, and it's instinctive. Yeah, it goes back to the time of primitive humans. We have an attachment and a pride in our immediate group, whether it's family, relatives, our community, our town, our county, our state, our country. And that is not something that can be just erased from human nature. And this gets on back to my observation that liberalism is founded on an intellectual fraud, and that's why they mess up so much. We'll be right back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And let's get right back to the phones here. Frank in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hey, Mike, I wanted to ask you a question. What's the name of this book that Hillary Clinton has out now?
What happened?
Okay, what happened?
It's got 2 pages in it. It says, I lost.
I was thinking she could write another book. It could be titled Why Hardly Anyone Read My Last Book.
Yeah, well, that would probably even be a worse seller. But I think the reason people didn't want to buy her book, and it's not been exactly a successful seller, even at a steeply discounted price, obviously the people who wanted her autograph, they bought a copy of the book. But it's basically a regurgitation of every blame game that Hillary used following her loss. It was all the fault of the men. It was the fault of women who voted for Trump. It was the fault of the media. It was the fault of the FBI. It was the fault of the email server scandal. It's the fault of Russia. Just blaming everybody except herself. She won't acknowledge her own failings. And that's really what it came on down to. The reality is, we were talking before about how somebody's public persona can be very pleasant, but while their real personal private life, they're very evil, nasty people, and I saw a lot of that in Hollywood. But the fact of the matter is that during the campaign last year, and certainly since the election, Hillary's public persona reeks of facade. She's not convincing when she tries to be nice Hillary. So I think that's also working against her.
Yeah, Larry Nichols always said he was a big part of their training. He said we taught them to look right into the camera and lie and to believe their own lives. He's still alive, by the way. He's supposed to be dead a long time ago, but he's still alive somehow.
Well,
now he keeps going.
Well, I know he's dealing with health issues. As we get older, we are all dealing with health issues. And I certainly would like for him to be around for a while longer. But, yeah, it is amazing when you consider how many of the Arkansas associates of the Clintons have died under questionable circumstances. It is amazing that Larry is still alive, and maybe it's just because he's got appropriate dead man switches in place.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Dale in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I'm calling to question about an article that's in News with Views. I don't know if you saw it on the Constitutional Convention that they're pushing for.
Yes.
Well, they're pushing for it under the name of something like Convention of the States, and they're only 7 states away from authorizing it. And the scary part to me is that if they open it up, there's no ground rules. They can delete Article 2 in a heartbeat.
You mean the Second Amendment? Yeah, it's entirely possible. I mean, I'd like to see a restart of the country, but very obviously the deep state, the narcocracy, if there were to be a new constitutional convention, they would do everything in their power to hijack it and use it to rewrite our current constitution to suit their particular agenda. And so it's a two-edged sword. It really is a two-edged sword. And again, we have a government that is blatantly ignoring the Constitution we have right now. So what good is coming up with a new Constitution when the government won't play by the rules?
Well, if it's a deep state that writes a Constitution, they'll play by the rules then.
Well, yeah, because the rules will favor them. You're absolutely right about that.
Okay, well, that's what I wanted to get a read on, so thanks for your time today.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. I'm looking at Fox News. There's another briefing about the Las Vegas shooting. They're milking this thing for everything that they can. Still don't have a motive for this guy to do what he did. They're thrashing all over, trying to find or make a motive that makes sense, but it's really not working. By the way, before the next phone call, somebody just sent me a YouTube video in which there's a shooting enthusiast there who says if you hold your AR-15, actually they're using an AMD 65 AKS 74U. If you hold it in a specific way, you can get it to rapid fire. Doesn't take a bump stock, doesn't take any special mods to the gun itself. And it reminds me back when I still had modern weapons back in Washington State. I tried this with a semi-auto I had and was able to get some rapid fire out of it. All right, let's go to Jerry in Chicago. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. It was about Vegas, but it was about Deanna Spangola's show Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
She had Vicky Davis on first hour channeling reality, and for the next 2 hours she had Mark R. Ellis.
Mm-hmm.
Elsis, I'm sorry. And he had looked up the domain. He just was clowning around one day, last Sunday morning, and he was clowning around on a computer, and he looked up the domain name Vegas shooting and Nevada shooting. And he had tied this in that 11 years, 2 months ago, on the same day, 1 second apart, somebody from Poland and somebody from Nevada paid for this domain name website. And he thought that was a little bit strange, so he called the Metropolitan Police Department over there in Vegas. They wouldn't even give him the time to take his call.
Well, I imagine they're being flooded with phone calls, and again, they're trying to push this official story. I know there were some claims that some of the news media websites had announced the shooting and the shooter's name and the victims date stamped before it actually happened. Now, that's all been taken down, and at this point we can't rule out that it's a simple computer goof. And that is one of the problems we have with the current state of software development in this country is we actually can't rely on what we're seeing on these websites to be accurate. I mean, that's how bad it. I mean, again, this new version of Skype, you wouldn't believe how bad it is. And I'm all over the web. I'm seeing people, complaining about it. And Skype, Microsoft doesn't seem interested in fixing any of these problems. They're getting ready to take away Skype for Business and offer a new product for sale.
Well, I would believe that, and I've also heard from 4 or 5 years ago that there are actually trolls, paid trolls. This is what helps pay their college tuition, to just simply get on the Internet and dump in a bunch of useless information.
Oh, yeah.
To send people on a wild goose chase. Okay. So, and one other thing, too, is that Vicky Davis, she made a comment about her research had led to believe something about international ports, and it goes back to 1989, George Herbert Walker Bush, putting America's infrastructure up for privatization and sale.
Well, that's been going on for a very, very long time, and it's a raw deal because that infrastructure was bought with taxpayer funds. That makes it the property of the American people, and the government doesn't have a right to simply steal the property of the American people and put it up for sale. I think that comes under the heading of usurpation.
Oh, well, I don't know what they call it, the government that is, but I guess when they need extra money and the black ops aren't going as good, or the heroin or the opium drugs coming into the country aren't doing as good, I guess stealing from the American people but calling it by a different name is a little bit better.
Oh, yeah, civil forfeiture, tariffs, land seizures by BLM, it's really kind of a mess. But yeah, remember that story that came out last week where Rahm Emanuel up in Chicago is saying they're not going to raise taxes on the people because he doesn't want to get voted out of office next time, but they're literally forming these special police squads whose only job is to go around and write these huge tickets for drivers over any minor infraction they can find. So we literally are living in an age where the government is funding itself through pillage and plunder of its own population.
You know, hey, Mike, it's funny you mentioned that because Rahm Emanuel has got his own, it's called Special Police, not Chicago Police Department, not CPD. It's called Special Police, and they don't work under the rules of the Constitution or any rules for that matter.
Okay. All right. Well,
and these are located in certain neighborhoods. That's all I wanted to leave you with. Thank you much.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Reese in New York. Aloha, Reese. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mike. This just out today that the insider trading took place with the MGM Grand stock. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've been hearing that.
Well, that's what I heard. This guy, James Murren, and it's not. Now, let me just say this to preface it. I've heard these stories, and it turns out later on that the, let's say the CEO owned like 2 million shares, and he was scheduled to sell, and he only sold a small portion. That's not the case here. He sold the lion's share of his stocks on September 7th, which was 294,000 shares, leaving only, how many? I'm looking at the SEC form here, leaving only 71,000 shares remaining.
Mm-hmm.
So he sold the lion's share, what is it, a month before, approximately? I mean, it sounds like 9/11 all over again.
Yeah, it does. There were a lot of funny games with the stocks. People were shorting the airline stocks of the involved airlines. And I remember this really bizarre story. In one of the two towers, they had computer systems for one of the major credit companies. And apparently just before the planes hit, there was a massive transfer of funds out of these computers. And then, of course, the attacks happened, the computers were destroyed, and they said, oh, well, somebody got away with a lot of money, we can't track them. Then there was this company in Europe that said, actually, we have a new system where we can read destroyed hard drives and recover the information. And they were given the hard drives from the computers to try and find out who'd gotten all this money. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, somebody buys this company in Europe, and the hard drives get put on a shelf, and that was the end of that story.
Well, isn't that convenient?
Absolutely.
By the way, I happen to know one of those agencies. I won't name it because I'm associated with it in New York City, where large, we're talking figure amounts went missing from their bank accounts that were in Trade Center, I believe 7, that disappeared, and they've never found that money. So that means there must have been a network of people that knew that this was happening, that were siphoning out the money, perhaps hours or minutes before the attack, and they knew that there'd be no one else that'd be able to uncover it because the computers and everything were gone. By the way, one other point, separate point. What do you think about Sheldon Adelson's visit right after the attack took place? Now, this guy's worth, I think, $30 billion. He's got casinos in Vegas and Macau and other places, and he shows up at the White House to ask Donald Trump for money to bail out his city. What do you think about that, Mike?
That does sound very suspicious and questionable, and we know that Sheldon Adelson is very much involved in a lot of the political machinations of this country. He was a heavy donor to both political parties. He donated to Trump and he donated to Hillary. I think he actually gave Hillary more. But yeah, I mean, there are so many smoke signals around this being an incredible false flag. And by the way, just backtracking a bit to the World Trade Center, there were gold vaults in the basement under the towers, and there was a huge amount of gold that was supposed to be in there. And during the cleaning away of the debris, they brought in security guards, and they went on down to that vault to open it up and transport the gold, and the vault was absolutely empty.
Tell you this much, I met one of the guys at a building supply that happened to be working on a tractor trailer not that morning. It was the last day that you would have been able to work in there, just before, during the weekend, basically, the weekend shift. He was there, and he seen the tractor trailer. There was several down in the basement loaded with gold bricks, at least as many as you could load in a tractor trailer, and he found that suspicious. And afterwards, of course, after the attack, he remembered that.
I'm not surprised.
A lot of witnesses like that. But I got to say, with Sheldon Adelson, Donald Trump donated, I believe, $1 million of his own money to help relief efforts in Puerto Rico, which is not even on American soil. Could you imagine how
Wait a minute. Puerto Rico is an American possession. Can you turn down the speaker in the background?
There's no speaker on here.
Oh, well, for some reason I'm getting a bad echo off of your phone.
Okay.
But Puerto Rico is an American possession, and the Puerto Ricans are considered American citizens.
I mean, it's on the continental United States. It's not on the North American continent. My point is this.
Neither am I.
From that point. No, but I mean, well, you know what? That's true. But my point is this. The bigger point is Donald Trump donated. He's not worth $30 billion. And he donated $1 million of his own money. This guy, Sheldon Adelson, makes his money off the misery of gamblers, prostitution, and basically ripping off the public. And yet he can't open up his bank account to help out his city. I mean, this is his city, Las Vegas. That is as despicable as it gets. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a long overdue shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network, and we've got one more caller here. Terry in Oregon, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, it's mostly Zionists that own Las Vegas, and, of course, they're there to drain the goys of their money. But anyway, the Zionists are really big on gun control, security, keeping track of everybody. And there's another dimension to this whole thing besides gun control. And you said it yourself before that the hotels might have liability. And that's a perfect excuse for putting airport-type security in these hotels as you walk in. And that the hotels in Las Vegas could just be the beginning of that for all other hotels and all businesses throughout the country. And then they really got us locked down because they could just as easy keep a record of every time you go through one of these security checkpoints.
Well, they already have a record of everywhere you're going from your cell phone. I mean, it's kind of a rather amazing thing that the American public are spending hundreds of dollars, and if Apple has its way, $1,000 on what amounts to a portable spy device permanently wired to their hip.
Yeah, that's true, except that when you go through a metal detector, they know more about you. They know if you're bringing metal. They know if you got a gun on you. So there's it goes a little bit deeper into control over the American public.
Well, the American public are probably going to get sick of all this poking and prodding. And like I said, my relationship with the TSA is not good because they dropped and smashed a very expensive laptop of mine up in Seattle. I didn't get an apology, let alone a replacement. And these morons here in Honolulu for the TSA, who apparently cannot actually read, ruined 2 reels of exposed negative during Lost, and that caused us all kinds of headaches. And I remember the last time Claire and I wanted to go to Disneyland, and the security was all set up. They were searching the purses and everything, and we looked at the line, and we just shrugged and said, it's not worth it. It's not worth going through this hassle to go to Disneyland, and I think more and more people are thinking the same way. And if they start putting up this kind of TSA, grab your crotch security at Las Vegas, I'm probably never going to go there again. Not that I tend to get there very, very often anymore. But it really is ridiculous, especially when you realize that real criminals and real terrorists, plus these perpetrators of the false flags, they just walk around all this stuff. Remember, the crotch bomber was literally walked around security at that airport and put on that airplane, according to witnesses.
Right. Okay, Mike, I just want to make the point that there's something more than just gun control. It's these security checkpoints, and that's it, and I'll talk to you next time.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call, and I'm not sure that the casinos in Las Vegas are going to want visible security because that's going to discourage people from going there. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And over in Las Vegas, they just finished their press conference with the latest news on the Las Vegas shooting, which really wasn't much more of anything than them saying, there's no evidence of a second shooter. There's no evidence of a second shooter. Really, trust us, there's no evidence of a second shooter. Alrighty, getting on back to science and technology. And every once in a while, there's a really cool story that's coming along here. And I'd actually heard of this before. And it's basically addressing the issue of battery life for electric cars. And apparently Toshiba this week unveiled a new type of battery that uses a new titanium niobium oxide anode material. And the company claims that the battery is designed for the automotive industry and can achieve a range of 200 miles on a single charge. And here's the best part. It can be recharged in 6 minutes. Now, my friend who called in the other day from Las Vegas was there for one of the big conventions where apparently this was being talked about at the time. Okay. All right, getting on back to the news here. This is a major problem all over the country and indeed in many other parts of the world. Story coming on out of Truth Out. The government, U.S. government, will not remove thousands of tons of potentially toxic chemical weapons dumped off U.S. coasts. And I might add, dumped off the coast of Hawaii as well. And basically, excuse me, a little bit of dust in the air. Basically, the U.S. officially ended its practice of dumping unused munitions at sea in 1972. But by then, there were literally tens of thousands of tons of chemical weapons, conventional munitions, radioactive waste had been dumped in the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, at sites up and down the nation's coastlines, including Alaska, Hawaii, and the Caribbean. Now, in the decades that followed, little was done to deal with the problems these sites present. The containers holding the chemical weapons, the munitions, the radioactive waste, are not designed to survive long immersion in salt water at high pressures that you find down in the deeps. Sooner or later, there's going to be a problem. Now, here in Hawaii, if you have a mariner's chart, there are little areas that are outlined that says, do not dragnet here, because it's a dumping site. They did at least mark them, remember where they are here. In 2006, Congress directed the Department of Defense to conduct a multi-pronged study to figure out just how many chemical and conventional munitions were slowly degrading in U.S. coastal waters, and whether it was feasible to retrieve these munitions from their watery graves. Congress also ordered the DoD to examine the ecological impact from toxic emissions as these munitions slowly corrode underwater, and their potential to cause harm to the people who use the oceans, like fishermen. And in a report to Congress in November of last year, the Department of Defense basically came on out and said from an ecological and safety perspective, it was deemed best to leave sea-disposed munitions in place. They don't want to spend the money. They don't want to do that. Now, I have an observation. We have been hearing all these reports, especially along the Pacific coast, of massive die-offs of sea life, birds, food source fish. And a lot of people are just chalking it up to radiation from Fukushima. Well, maybe Fukushima doesn't get the blame here. Because these chemical weapons, if they're starting to leach into the ocean, they're going to kill the sea life. And especially if you look at some of the burning, blistering agents that were included in those chemical munitions, then all of a sudden the marks on the fish become easy to understand. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Getting on back to the news. I was talking about how the government has just dumped all of these highly toxic chemical weapons off of all of our coasts, and they're not going to remove them. And we are talking about stuff that goes back to World War II, the 1940s. It's been a very long time they've been down there, and we keep hearing all these reports about massive die-offs of fish, marine mammals, birds, all along these coastlines. And Fukushima's been getting the blame. Well, maybe not. And as I mentioned going into the commercial break, many of these chemical weapons are considered to be what are called burning and blistering agents, like mustard gas. And looking at some of the fish that are washing up on the coastlines dead, their bodies are covered with these strange lesions. And so I would say that it's quite possible that some of these chemical weapons drums have reached the point of failing. And they're leaching these chemicals into the water. And it's another assault on our food supply here on planet Earth, along with Fukushima, the Deepwater Horizon. And now we have all these abandoned chemical weapons toxifying the ocean. And I think that ought to be looked into. Because if that is what's going on, you know the government will never admit to it. Now, apparently over at Facebook, their chief security officer basically is out there saying censorship is easy if you don't worry about becoming the Ministry of Truth. Basically saying that the fake news problem is more complicated and dangerous to solve than the public thinks. Now, I'm sorry, but if you're out there censoring alternative views of the official story, then yes, you are the Ministry of Truth. And everybody understands that's what's going on, especially with YouTube's recent campaign against online videos taken by those people at the Route 91 concert. Now, there's another accusation that Russian hackers stole NSA data in 2015, and they're saying likely via the Kaspersky software. Oh, bad Russia, bad Kaspersky. Now, you need to understand that Kaspersky is produced in Russia, and we know that computer security systems produced inside the United States of America are compelled by the U.S. government to have the usual assortment of backdoors and wormholes and stuff in there. Kaspersky doesn't go along with that. And that's why they're trying to ban it. They don't want you having anything on your computer that's going to keep the government out. Now, what's really interesting about this story, first of all, there's absolutely no proof Kaspersky had anything to do with this. There's no proof that the hackers were Russian. And here's where it gets interesting. Nobody broke into the NSA. They had a contractor who took information home and put it on his home computer. So it's really the NSA contractor who caused this. But we're going to spin it. It's Russia's fault. Russian hacking, Russian hacking, Russian hacking. Speaking of hacking, Microsoft seems to be aiming along a direction that's going to make hacking a little bit easier. Because Microsoft is trying to fix all of the security problems in Windows 10, but they're not back propagating those security fixes to Windows 8 or Windows 7. Even though those operating systems are not officially sunsetted, they're not getting the security updates. Now, speaking of sunsetted, apparently Microsoft has transferred Windows 10 Mobile into what's called servicing mode, meaning no new updates, no new features, no new apps. They're going to fix bugs and do security updates, and that's it. Now, I got to tell you, I have a bone to pick with Microsoft over Skype, because Skype was working just fine. And then all of a sudden, I'm working on this machine, and Skype comes on up and says, you must upgrade to the latest version for your operating system, because if you do not, you will not be allowed to sign into your Skype account. Oh, okay, fine. So I hit the upgrade, and it is horrible. The most obvious thing being that while I can make calls to other Skype users, I can't receive them. They don't ring. They don't show up. And then after the call ends, there'll either be an icon saying you got voicemail or you missed a call from somebody. And that's tremendously inconvenient. Now, I've been trying to debug this all over this last weekend. I completely uninstalled Skype and reinstalled it again from the correct installer from Microsoft. Still cannot fix the problem. Another problem that it has is if you're in Skype in the text window and you type /show places, it shows everywhere you're logged in. And there's supposed to be a command that says /remote logout, where you can shut down every other login to Skype other than the one you're working on. That apparently doesn't work either. And right now when I do a show places, I get the current login information, endpoint, and then there's another endpoint there with no identifiers, just the number. And I know where it went. It went to the iPad. But I'm signed out of the iPad, but it's still showing me as connected. And there's no way to shut that off. I mean, this thing is just full of bugs. It's horrible. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Rob in Illinois, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, you're not the only one having Skype problems as far as broadcasters go. There's some other networks where they usually use the Skype to take in calls and whatnot, but they cannot pick up the call. They cannot connect.
Yep.
Every now and again, they can take the person's phone number and call them back. But everyone's having these issues. Either, like Incendiary Radio, Robert Rayvold, he keeps getting dropped all night long. Now it could be something other, but all night long, and this guy keeps getting dropped from his connection.
Well, back when it was peer-to-peer, it worked really, really well. But then Microsoft bought it and turned it into a piece of junk. Now, the other day when we were having problems with Skype dropping here, I went over to downdetector.com, and it showed that Skype's servers were overloaded. And apparently that was a major problem, and people were complaining about that. But it isn't just radio broadcasters. We use Skype to talk to family on the mainland. You know, look at the little kiddies, wish them happy birthday, and the rest of it. And our family on the mainland are saying that they updated their Skype on their smart devices. They can't get it to work. The camera won't come on. It's a major, major mess up. And my question is, if it wasn't broken before, why did you break it? Why did you force everybody to upgrade to a new version of Skype that is a piece of crud?
Right. Well, as you've referenced several times before on different companies, they just don't care anymore. They'll take your money, shove out some piece of garbage, and then have you deal with it. You know what I mean?
Well, it's gotten just ridiculously out of control. We need to restore product liability, not just to computers and software, but to vaccines. because product liability is what incentivizes companies to produce good product. You take that away, yeah, they're going to do the cheapest job that they can. They're going to push it on out there for sale. With planned obsolescence, you have to use the latest, greatest version. But this current version of Skype, it is just garbage. And from what I'm reading around the web, a lot of people are having these problems, and we're not getting anything back. I even went over to the blog for Skype over at Microsoft, and they're out there saying, well, there are some issues. We'll get around to them sooner or later, probably later.
Right. Well, the people, either the CEO, I don't know, I can't reference this correctly, but the guy that's in charge of Skype, that's in concerto with Microsoft, he happens to be, this is what someone was reporting. They were like, yeah, I looked at all this up. He's a Zionist. They're out of Columbus, Ohio, I think, or somewhere like that. And that's all I got on that. Anyway, let's move on.
Okay.
The environment, man, you think, man, all this money they spend on all these wars, they want to talk about global climate change and all this other garbage. You know, take this money, man, and clean up the water supplies and focus on these radiation disasters we have all around our country, you know. I mean, they do nothing of the sort. And then you're mentioning this story where they dumped all the chemicals in the water. Take money and go and clean that up, because things are dying. There's so many different species. There was like over 6,000 different species of sea life, name it, you know, different whatever levels of habitat that have just disappeared. It's like it's down to nothing. And then here's another point.
It really is.
Radiation. Here's another point. Here's one of the radio hosts pointed out. He's like, you know, I got this letter from somebody, and they're pointing out, you know, I don't really see the activity of the squirrels and the birds and the bees and the insects that we know. And they instructed everybody just kind of like start taking awareness. Do you notice as many bees? Do you notice as many, you know, insects around? You know, you and me, Mike. You know, the bluebirds and the cardinals. I haven't seen a bluebird or a cardinal all year. And then on the other day, I'm sitting. I'm out the back of my house where I used to go. I go all the time in the morning and whatever, mid morning. And all these birds used to line up on the telephone wire there, like clockwork, every year, every summer, every spring, and they're gone. I didn't even realize it until most of the end of the summer.
Yeah,
they're gone. They're not there. And then we used to have more rabbits around, and I saw squirrels. I haven't seen a squirrel. We used to have like 6, 7 rabbits, family of rabbits around. Now there's only like 2, if I ever see them. So things are going on.
Well, you know, there's a reality that we need to deal with. We know about that French study that showed exposure to glyphosate would lead to premature death, reproductive problems in animals, specifically rats. But all of these animals you're talking about, rabbits, squirrels, and everything, they're going to be getting into people's gardens because that's what animals do. And if those gardens have been sprayed with Roundup, then it's basically a death sentence for that animal.
Right. Well, I'm thinking almost a dramatic change from even last year. You know what I mean? Like I said, year after year after year, those birds were there. It's been clockwork. They love that telephone wire. They're gone. I don't know where they're at, but they're not there.
Well, yeah, I mean, anyway, we're reaching saturation levels with glyphosate all over the place, and I do keep watch on indicator species out here. The one good piece of news I can report is all of a sudden the monarch butterflies are starting to come back. I mean, they were just about gone, and this summer I noticed there were a lot more than there were last year. So some of the animals are adapting to whatever it is that's killing them off, and they're coming back.
Okay, I want to resort to Vegas here. Now, I'm going to hit at this a different angle. Let's go with anomalies. Anomalies for 500, Alex. Remember those crime scene photos that they leaked out?
Yes.
Where are the little yellow tents with all the numbers on them? Where are those?
Very good observation on your part.
And, you know, also the field. They have this whole field. They show this. Did you ever see the video where they like the aerial footage of the park the next day where it's all daylight and all the stuff is scattered around? You'd think they would have all those tents all around where they're finding all these bullet casings and whatnot. There's none of that. There's no footage of them actually scouring the fairgrounds looking for where the bullets hit, the trajectory. Here's another anomaly. In all of these videos, you hear any glass breaking? Do you hear any pings off of metal or anything else? There's no, these bullets were like, hit flesh, no, they would have been in the dirt. They would have been knocking off of fence posts. They would have been knocking off the stage,
if you look at how tightly packed that crowd was, that's all the bullets could hit, were the concert goers.
Well, all the same, there would be things, it'd be hitting other things. If they're literally spraying bullets, like we tend to believe we're hearing over these recordings, it'd be hitting other things. It'd be bouncing off pavement, posts, and this and that and the other. So that's that anomaly. I was just listening to Rick Adams the other day, and Art from Philly, he does NoPlaceForCorruption.com, and he's like, he says the Paddock he believes they're Jewish. He says Paddock, you can't go completely by the name because they changed their names. But he's like, if you look at their features, he believes they're Jewish in their heritage.
Okay.
Let's go with nothing. Doug Hatton.
Well, hang on. Before we move forward, I still don't think Paddock was the actual shooter.
Well, I'm not even going in there again. I'm just going with anomalies here right now. I don't even want to get in that assumption, conclusion game because, they're throwing out so much. If you listen to the Dave Hodges show last night, he had Jim Fetzer, he had Paul Preston. Paul Preston's pretty great. And then he had Robert David Steele. And they were throwing out all sorts of, different thought process. But I'm not going to pin down on anything. I'm still going. I still believe the Lee Harvey Paddock clause, but we just don't know yet because this whole thing is a setup. It's a fraud. It's a hoax. It's been staged. It's been scripted. Something's going on that we don't know. I still don't know this very minute if it's real that people actually died, were hurt, or whatnot. I am so baffled by the thing that I've just kind of taken a step back, and I'm not going to try and conclude one way or the other. I want this thing to come out in the wash somehow or another. We know it's going to be lies, just like 9/11, just like Charlottesville, just like
the government will never come clean on it. We're just going to have to decide for ourselves what's going on and just move forward from that. I think anybody who's out there saying, we demand a new investigation, you're wasting your time. It's just an opportunity for the government to try and polish the lies one more time. We know.
And manufacture.
Yes.
Manufacturing evidence, manufacturing videos. All they got to do is set up a hotel room and say, well, this is the actual footage. There's all sorts of things they can do to recreate something. You'll never know. Like you said earlier, we don't know timestamps. We don't know if that's last Friday or 2 years ago.
That's right.
We have no idea. So, what else was that? Oh, your buddy called in about Deanne Spingola's show. Now, the lady in the first hour, she ties all this in. She's been researching this. This isn't some just flake or whatever. She's been tracing. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have to let you go here and do a commercial break. Thank you for the information. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Columbus Day here. Getting on back to this question of social media now being used to control what you see. Apparently, the vaccine industry is pressuring Pinterest to censor all posts that are critical of vaccine safety. And Pinterest is apparently going along with that right now. Now, another little issue that we need to be paying attention to, a lot of people are talking about how there is a growing problem from antibiotic-resistant microbes. And people are wondering what's going on. And apparently, according to this article over in Homeland Security Newswire, the issue may be the overuse of antimicrobials in animals. And that this is where these antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria are beginning to emerge. And, of course, people who are eating the meat and dairy products from these animals, they're being exposed to these antibiotics, antimicrobials. And in turn, within their body, it's leading to drug resistance in humans. We're seeing so much science that is just recklessly being deployed and sold without regard to its long-term possible damage. Now, apparently, back in 2012, discus the little online chat that so many websites uses, they were hacked, and more than 17.5 million user details were stolen. And apparently the data included email addresses, usernames, sign-up dates, last login dates, in plain text for the 17.5 million users. Hackers also got their hands on passwords for about 1/3 of the affected users, which were apparently salted and hashed using the weak SHA-1 algorithm. Now, a lot of people are very concerned over the fact that Apple granted the Uber application a secret backdoor that lets Uber record your iPhone's screen without your knowing. And this is an exception to Apple's normal rules, but apparently this could be used to record a user's screen and access other sensitive data without their knowledge or permission. And none of this is mentioned in any of Uber's public information or where this data is going. And I imagine a lot of the other Apple app developers are saying, why can't we get the same deal? Speaking of Apple again, apparently Apple's Mac OS can reveal your encrypted drive's password in the hint box. That's a bad one here. Apparently over at HPE, their July service pack for ProLiant servers bricked some network adapters so badly they had to be replaced. There was no way to bring them back, no way to turn them back on, no way to reset them. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I have to go up and do a Jim Goddard show in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow here on Republic Broadcasting Network. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller's program. He's got a lot of good things to share with you. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.